when we're on the cusp of coming into that next fuller expression of who we are, that's exactly the moment when imposter syndrome comes in, because that's when fear comes in. It's like, oh, you're about to expand. Ooh, I don't know if it's safe. So I'm going to send all of these imposter syndrome messages to try to create a speed bump to slow down the process of you stepping into that next version of yourself. Welcome to How to Trust Yourself, the podcast for anyone who's done with the endless second guessing and ready to tune in to your inner guidance. I'm Anna Holtzman, and I get that feeling of trudging through life like you're wading through mud, trying to figure out which way to go. In my 20s, I spent more time asking what should I do with my life than writing about crushes or bad dates in my journal. I've tried on a lot of answers: architecture, publishing, editing reality TV for a decade, and finally landing on therapy and coaching, helping people like you connect with your purpose. But here's the thing I've learned through all those twists and turns. Trusting yourself is the key to moving forward, even when the path feels messy. So if you're ready to stop doubting yourself and start listening to your gut, you're in the right place. Let's dive in. Welcome back, dear listener. Today's episode is on one of my favorite topics, and it probably comes up in some way in every episode that I've recorded, but I kind of can't believe that I have not dedicated an episode to this topic specifically yet, because it's so central to the work I do. And this topic, I'm making it all mysterious, leading, drawing it out. What is it going to be? Drum roll. The topic is imposter syndrome. Not a revolutionary topic, but it is one that it's so important. It's so central. And today's episode is going to be all about imposter syndrome. And the funny thing is, I was planning to record a completely different episode today. It was on a different topic. I had my question guide for myself. I don't know if you've heard my previous episodes where I talk about the way that I set myself up to record solo episodes. I find it much easier to record a solo episode when I'm answering questions instead of just talking from a blank slate. And so I always create a question guide for myself to interview myself before recording. So anyway, I had this whole different topic all teed up, ready to go. I was going to record yesterday. I was just like, I don't know, I was feeling off and it just wasn't happening. And then, so I was like, all right, today's the day. I'm sitting down to record, and it still was just feeling so off. And I was starting to have it was the imposter syndrome thoughts were coming on. It was like, oh, I don't know. I don't have anything to say. I don't know how to talk. Nothing's coming out right. Maybe I'm just not cut out for this. Maybe I should just quit podcasting, even though I love podcasting. It's like one of my favorite things. But I just feel so unclear, unfocused, unmotivated, blah, blah, blah. Sound familiar? I mean, these are like the cliched things that most of us hear from that little imposter syndrome personality that we've got somewhere inside of us. And funny enough, the idea hit me as I was like going through this inner turmoil of like, I don't have anything to say. I'm unfocused. I'm unclear. And then, so I stopped recording. I was already in the midst of recording a different episode. I hit pause, took a minute to do a little journaling to see like what was going on here. And as I was slowing down, I just like this memory came to me of a conversation I'd had with someone just a couple of days ago. where I could see that they were dealing with imposter syndrome. And then it reminded me of another conversation I'd had with a client, and another conversation with a friend, and another conversation with a peer of mine in the business mastermind that I'm in. And then, like, an email that I had gotten just recently of all of these amazing, smart, brilliant, talented, creative, awesome people who I look up to, who I, just drink in their brilliance, all expressing imposter syndrome, which, I think we all experience imposter syndrome. And it's something that I think people bring to me for some reason. Like, that seems to be a thing that shows up on my door as a coach, as a friend, as a peer. And it's something I really love to work with. It's something I can completely relate to. And it's something that I feel really very, very called to support people with, because, when I see someone who's so brilliant, who I admire so much, who, like, I can see their brilliance so clearly, I'm not going to let them wallow in imposter syndrome uh, for longer than is necessary. I'm not gonna, I can't just stand by as a passive onlooker when I see someone in the throes of imposter syndrome, and I'm like, I want your brilliance. I see your clarity. I want to drink it in. I'm not gonna let imposter syndrome stand in the way for you. And so, yeah, I was in my own imposter syndrome funk, trying to figure out why the episode I was recording wasn't working. And then, like, these one after another, these recent memories came to me that all connected back to imposter syndrome. And then, literally, as I was like coming to that idea of, like, oh, duh, that's what I'm going to talk about today. That's what I have clarity about today. Yet another email popped into my inbox from yet another brilliant person who I had recently gotten on a call with. We had talked about potentially her joining my coaching program, my one-on-one coaching program. And then she sent me this email, and of course, what she was bringing to me was, again, imposter syndrome. Like, am I really ready for this? And I was like, oh my gosh, you're so beyond ready for this. Like, you're so clear. You know what your next step is. This is just the very relatable imposter syndrome coming in, saying things like, you're not ready. You don't know yet. You're not there yet. Anyway, it just became crystal clear to me in that moment that this is going to be the topic for today's episode: imposter syndrome, and how imposter syndrome shows up right before you are ready and about to expand into that next version of yourself, into that next version of your creativity, of your business, of yourself, of your voice. When we're on the cusp of expanding, when on the cusp of coming into that next fuller expression of who we are, that's exactly the moment when imposter syndrome comes in, because that's when fear comes in. It's like, oh, you're about to expand. Ooh, I don't know if it's safe. So I'm going to send all of these imposter syndrome messages to try to create a speed bump to slow down the process of you stepping into that next version of yourself. So we're going to talk today about how that unfolds and how to work with imposter syndrome, because it does not have to stop you, and it does not mean you're not ready. It actually means you are ready. It means you are ready, and your readiness is frightening to your nervous system. Your nervous system is like, oh crap, she or he is ready to step into something bigger. Yikes, I'm scared. I'm going to send some imposter syndrome signals. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Okay, so what is imposter syndrome? What is it actually? And I want to share with you my framing of imposter syndrome, which may or may not be different from the way that you've been thinking about it. But I have come to view imposter syndrome as not just fear in general. First of all, it's fear. It's an expression of fear, but it's specifically that fear of expansion. Imposter syndrome is an expression of your nervous system's fear of expansion. And why would we be afraid of expansion, whether consciously or unconsciously? Why, in other words, why would our nervous system be afraid of expansion? Better question is probably why wouldn't it be afraid of expansion? We all have a million and one stories about expanding and getting knocked back down to size. I mean, you have a million stories. I have a million stories. Every single person in the world has zillions of stories, specifically from childhood. I mean, we have them from adulthood too, but the ones from childhood are the ones that really, are formative, that stick with us, because that is the period of the most vulnerable and rapid development that we go through. And the experiences that we have in childhood are the ones that our nervous system is learning from the most in our most formative times. So they really tend to stick with us. They make an imprint on us. Whether or not our mind remembers these stories, our nervous system holds on to these stories and uses these stories as like a roadmap to how to respond to the world around us, how to respond to our life experiences, what to perceive as safe or dangerous. Like when you're a little kid, you probably at some point either, you may have gotten stung by a bee or touched the fire on the stove and ouch, it hurt. And your nervous system learned, okay, stay away from bees, keep your finger out of the fire. You may or may not think about those things consciously with your mind, but your nervous system holds on to those experiences and uses them as a roadmap to, what is safe and what is dangerous in the world. And undoubtedly, you have had many experiences of expanding into that next version of yourself and getting blowback for it, and your nervous system learning that it's not safe to expand. I'll just share the one that, for whatever reason, this is the one that pops up for me and plays on repeat, even though I've had, just like you, so many different experiences like this. For some reason, there's just this one story that always pops easily into my memory. I was in I think I was in the second grade, and I was really, really into school. I was really into knowing stuff. I was into being smart. I was into knowing the answer. And he was very into enthusiastically raising my hand. I don't know if you were that kid or had that kid in your class that just like always had their hand up. And it was like, you know, you could like hear or see them like squirming in their seat, like, call on me. I have the answer. I have the answer. Oh, I know. I know. And so that was me. I always had my hand up. I loved knowing the answer, and I really wanted to share that with the world, expand into the world with my brilliance. And this one time in second grade, my teacher, name redacted for privacy's sake. I loved her. She was a great teacher, but this was maybe not her greatest moment. I had my hand up, squirming around, all enthusiastic, and she looked at me and she said, "Anna, nobody likes a know-it-all." Ouch. Ugh. Ugh. Shame. Oh my gosh, I felt so shot down and ashamed in that moment. And clearly it stayed with me. I'm 48 years old now. This was second grade. I was, I guess, like 7 or 8 years old. And like that moment just comes back to me so viscerally. I was like, ugh, I thought I was just like, you know, sharing my soul with the world, like so happy and excited that I had the answer to this question and I wanted to spread my wings and answer the question. And then when I saw that look from her and heard those like withering words, I mean, I just wanted to like crumple up and die and turn into a ball of dust under my desk and like sink into the floor and drop into the basement of the school. And, I was like, crap. I don't know what I thought. I was just like, this is a good thing, what I'm doing. I'm loving it. I feel good. And then when I experienced her reaction, which of course was entirely about her having a bad day. I mean, who talks to a kid like that? But I didn't know that or think that in the moment. I thought, oh my God, my teacher hates me. And probably everyone in my class who I thought liked me actually hates me because apparently I'm a know it all. And apparently that's like the most odious thing. Um, and, I didn't never raise my hand after that, but I definitely thought about it once or twice or 5 times before doing so, from then on, and it still comes up for me. Like, I just got back actually a couple of days ago. I just got back from Portugal, which is a whole other story. Portugal is beautiful. It was amazing. And I was there, uh, on a retreat with this business mastermind that I've joined. It's a coaching group led by this incredible, wonderful business coach who I adore. It's with a group of, I'm not sure how many we are actually. I think it's like 16 or 18 other women. They're all amazing. I love them. They're so smart and interesting and just inspiring. And I love being around them and connecting with them. And of course, I want to be liked by them. And when we were having our learning sessions where our coach was leading us and asking us interesting questions, and there was opportunity for us to raise our hand and answer these questions. I felt just like that second grade version of me, just like so eager, like wanting to connect, wanting to participate, wanting to like share what was in my heart and on my mind, wanting to like shoot my hand up right away. And sometimes I did. And there was that fear of like, ugh, am I talking too much? Is everybody gonna hate me? Do they think I'm like full of myself for wanting to say something? Um, and that's not something that we're born feeling or thinking. That is something that our nervous system learns through these formative experiences in our childhood. And so your formative experiences might be similar to the one that I described. They might be completely different, but whatever they are, I know you have those formative experiences of getting blowback for expanding, for using your voice, for taking up space, for sharing your brilliance, for sharing what's on your heart. We all have those experiences, and that is where the fear comes from. That fear of expansion comes from those imprinting experiences. And to my way of seeing it, that is where we learn imposter syndrome. That is where we learn the fear of expanding. So, to summarize, imposter syndrome does not mean that you are an imposter. Completely not. It's the total opposite of that. Imposter syndrome does not mean that you have nothing valuable to say, that you don't know what you're doing, that you're not clear about what you want to do. Imposter syndrome means that you do know what you're doing, that you do know where you want to go next, that you do have something really important to say. And the fact that you are getting revved up to say it tips off that fear of expansion, because imposter syndrome is simply that fear of expansion. So, I want to talk about now some of the different ways that imposter syndrome can show up, because sometimes it's very obvious to us that what we're dealing with is imposter syndrome. Sometimes it's very obvious that, oh yeah, like I'm doubting my expertise and this is imposter syndrome. But a lot of the times, imposter syndrome comes up in these sneaky ways. And that's what makes it so effective, is it's like, it's very convincing. You could think of imposter syndrome as think of it as like the Wizard of Oz, that frightened little man behind the curtain, and he's sending these big, scary messages, and everyone's like, oh, that voice knows everything, and it must be right. And a lot of the time, imposter syndrome speaks to us in that kind of a voice, like a very authoritative, logical sounding voice that convinces us that it knows what it's talking about, when actually it's just a form of fear. So here are like just a smattering of different examples of how I've seen imposter syndrome come up in people I know, in friends, peers, colleagues, clients, just recently. And I'll start off by sharing just how it showed up for me this morning. I was talking about this a little bit with you earlier, but yeah, I sat down to record a different podcast earlier this morning on a different topic. And I was like, just not feeling in the flow. And I started to spiral. I started to like have these thoughts started to spiral around like, you have nothing to say. You always have, this like deer in the headlights freeze when you go to record something, which isn't true, but that's what this voice was saying. Like, you never have anything to say. You are just in a fog. You're so confused. You're unfocused. You're unclear. And nothing you've ever said has any value, and you don't have any interesting experiences to draw from in your life. And, it's like the spin cycle that can just completely carry you away. So that's a way that imposter syndrome, aka fear of expansion or fear of visibility, we could call it too, fear of sharing our voice. That's one way it can show up. Another related way is I have a really dear friend who I just admire the crap out of this person. I really look up to her. She's so brilliant. She's so just like, to me, everything she does turns to gold. She's just really great at what she does. And she works in a corporate environment currently at a, full-time job. And she has a vision of stepping out of that environment and starting her own practice, her own independent uh, consulting practice. And she feels like she's getting ready for it, and she needs to prepare and prepare and prepare. Needs to get, like, much more clear on what it is that she actually wants to offer people. Um, and she and I have had so many conversations about this, and I can completely 1,000% relate to where she's at. And what I can very clearly see is she like, she's ready now. She's so ready now. She has everything she could possibly need to step out and have her own business. She has all the clarity she absolutely needs to, help her future clients. She's already doing, like, in her present job, she's already doing what she's going to be doing in her own business. And for a host of very valid and understandable reasons, her nervous system, just like my nervous system, just like probably your nervous system, has learned that stepping out there on your own is dangerous, that taking up space is not safe, that having your own opinion, that standing in your own authority, that, trusting your own opinion on things is going to catch blowback. And so even when that's not front of mind, the nervous system is going to want to slam on the brakes when we're stepping out into that expansion. And it can say things like, you're not ready yet. You're not clear enough yet. Another example of this comes from one of the amazing clients that I am currently working with, who I love working with her. She's just got so much brilliance and creativity bubbling out of her. Um, and she came to me. One of the things that was kind of like feeling risky to even say out loud, I think, was that she wanted to write a book. It started with, I want to write more. I want to make writing into a more regular practice. And the the challenge, she thought, or we thought in the beginning, was like how to trust her way into writing more consistently. But what became really clear pretty early on to me was that, like, she was already a geyser of writing. Like, writing was already and had been pouring out of her for a long time. And she already had a book's worth of material. Like, it was all there. But the imposter syndrome, or the fear of taking up space, the fear of expanding, the imposter syndrome was saying, you haven't written enough yet. You need to write more. And that was actually just a way of pumping the brakes on that next level of expansion, which is publishing the book, sharing the book, letting other people in on the writing. And again, for like a host of so many real life reasons, and we all have our own set of these experiences, the nervous system, her nervous system, probably yours, definitely mine, had learned that if you speak out loud, if you share your own writing, your own thoughts, your own musings, your own, just like that material that comes from inside of you and wants to pour out, if you let it pour out, if you let other people see it and interact with it, they're going to have a harsh reaction to it, and you won't be safe. So instead of her nervous system saying, oh, you want to put a book out there? Fantastic. We're going to support this. Instead, the nervous system was like, I don't think you've written enough yet. So let's just stay in that phase forever. So that's another way that imposter syndrome can show up. And then yet another way that imposter syndrome can show up I'll pull an example from another amazing coaching client of mine. This client came to me saying, like, she's launching a business, or she has a business. It's a side business, and she wants to go full on, make this her full time thing, and really put her beautiful business out there into the world. And she came in initially telling me, like, there's all these things that I need to do in order to really launch this thing. And I know what I need to do, but I don't know why. I'm just not doing it. I'm like really not following through, and I can't figure out why. Well, it turns out that was just imposter syndrome speaking, is saying, like, you're supposed to do XYZ and you're not following through. And what we identified was that um, she really needed to put some boundaries in place, some time boundaries, needed to say no and take a step back from some of the other obligations that were taking up all of her time and energy, and just simply leaving no energy available to put into doing those things for her business. Once those boundaries were put in place, all that energy and follow through came about naturally. It was right there. It was right, like, that ability was completely available to her, but there was of taking up space, fear of taking up space, fear of expanding into doing her own thing. And that fear took the form of, uh, first of all, a fear of setting boundaries, which once we identified that fear, we could work through it. And then the imposter syndrome was saying, oh no, you're just not following through on what you're supposed to do in your own business. So those are just a, you know, a smattering of different ways that imposter syndrome can show up, and it could be a little bit sneaky and hard to identify as imposter syndrome. So now you've got some examples of some of the different ways that imposter syndrome can look. And now we're going to talk about what to do about it. How do we work with imposter syndrome, and how do we move through it? Because I don't want imposter syndrome to be running your life, to be holding you back from the brilliance, from the gifts, from the inspiration that you have to share with the world. I want to learn from that. I want to be recharged by that. I want to be fed by everything that you are here to share with the world. And I also don't want to have my own life ruled by imposter syndrome, because it doesn't feel good. We feel like, bloated with potential when we allow imposter syndrome to run the show. And I hate feeling bloated, and you probably do too. So, what do we do? How do we work with imposter syndrome? The first thing is to name it. The first thing is to name it as imposter syndrome, or to name it as fear. And, how do we do that? We first need to recognize it. And you could use some of those examples that I gave just a moment ago to help you recognize, how does imposter syndrome tend to show up for you? It tends to have, certain favorite flavors for different people. Like, my imposter syndrome tends to show up in certain very predictable ways for me. They might be similar, or they might be different for you. So just start getting to know, like, what is your imposter syndrome's favorite flavor? What are the catchphrases it likes to use? Because here's the thing about imposter syndrome and what makes it easy to recognize once you know how to recognize it, is that it's very repetitive. It is very cliche. It tends to use the same language over and over and over again for many different scenarios. Whether it's a scenario in your personal life or in your creative life, in your professional life, in any area of your life, imposter syndrome tends to use the same tired old language. Like for me, some of my imposter syndrome's favorite catchphrases are, "You're not doing enough. Nobody likes you. You're not interesting. Your life isn't interesting, and you have nothing to share." Those phrases, I hear them so often from my own imposter syndrome that even though I still get sucked in by it, and then I have to bring myself back out of it, I've got to like coach myself back out of that loop. I can recognize it as fear, as imposter syndrome, because these are just such tired old phrases that I've heard over and over again, like a broken record. So just notice when you hear a phrase or you just like get a sense from that inner fearful voice and you're like, "I've heard this 1,000 times before." That's a clue, and that will help you to name it. Name it as imposter syndrome. When we name it, we're already taking some of the fear down, taking some of the authority of that imposter syndrome voice down. We're kind of peeling back the curtain on the Wizard of Oz and saying, "Oh, it's just a scared little guy. This is not a booming voice of authority." Step one is name it. And if you're having trouble naming it or identifying it, and you're just really in that loop with it, with the imposter syndrome, with that negative self talk, it can be very helpful to bring in someone else to reflect to you what's going on. To reach out to a friend and share, like, "Oh my gosh, I feel like I don't know what I'm doing, blah, blah, blah," whatever it is. Share it with someone else so they can reflect that clarity back to you. Share it with a coach if you're working with a coach. Um, Share it with ChatGPT if that's all you have available. See what ChatGPT reflects back to you. I don't know, that's a little trick that I like to use when I'm in between things and I don't have a moment to reach out to another person. Find a way to name what's going on. And then I would ask yourself this question. Once you've named that what's going on is imposter syndrome, I would ask yourself, what does my nervous system think is going to happen if I take up space? If I trust myself and take that next step? If I share my voice? If I share my work? If I make that post on Instagram? If I launch that business? If I put on an art show? What is my nervous system is afraid is going to happen? What negative repercussions is my nervous system trying to protect me from? Ask yourself this question and see what comes back to you. And then when you get an inkling, it might be clear or it might be fuzzy, but when you get some inkling of what it is that your nervous system is actually afraid of, then you can go about the work of dialoguing with your nervous system, of, attuning to it, of really like honoring the fears, talking to it like you would talk to a friend. If your friend was preparing to give a speech on stage, and then she was having all these fears about it, fears of people not liking her, fears of people coming after her, of booing, of like, being run out of town. Um, you wouldn't want to immediately say like, "Oh, you're just being ridiculous. That's not going to happen. Whatever. Why are you afraid?" Like, no. You'd be compassionate. You'd say, "Oh, I could totally relate to those fears. I've had really similar fears myself. That's really normal. That's like just a normal human response." You would normalize it. You would maybe give her a hug. You would share your compassion. You would remind her that she's not alone. She's not weird. She's not a freak. She's not broken. Like this is just a normal human response. And then you would remind her that there are a lot of friendly people in that audience, even if there are a bunch of strangers there too. And sure, some of them might not like what you have to say. Some of them might have their own crap going on in their lives, and they might respond in an inappropriate way. Um, but that happens. But there are the people there that are really going to be impacted by what you have to say, that want to hear what you have to say. You might tell her, "I'm going to be there in the audience supporting you. I've got your back, and like I love hearing you speak, and I'm really longing to hear what you have to say. So, please don't stop yourself." Um, you would encourage her, you would reassure her that there is safety to be found and there is connection to be found in stepping onto that stage and sharing her talk. So these are the same ways that you can talk yourself through the fear, through the imposter syndrome, that you can bring yourself back to your own feelings of safety and connection. And you can also, again, like have a friend come in and help you with this, have a coach come in and support you with this. Turn to your peer group or to that one trusted person who can help talk you down from the fear and help you reconnect to your your reason, your desire, to that spark inside you that wants to raise your hand and say, "I know I have an answer to this question. I want to share it with people." So, just to review what we've been talking about with imposter syndrome, we started off with what actually is imposter syndrome. And I propose that we can look at imposter syndrome as the fear of expansion, our nervous system hitting the brakes when it detects that we are about to expand, and it's hitting the brakes because it fears repercussion for expansion. So, what is imposter syndrome? It is fear of expansion. And next, how to recognize it. You can recognize it by those tired old cliches that it whispers in your ear, those tired old negative self talk phrases, those tired old doubts that it whispers in your ear. That's how to recognize it. And finally, what to do about it. We've got to have a conversation with our nervous system to find out what it is afraid of so that we can help to soothe our nervous system, so that we can connect with it, we can soothe it, we can comfort it, we can normalize it, and then we can help our nervous system to feel inspired to take the next step forward, to take action, to open our mouth and speak, to let the flow happen. So, if anything about this episode today spoke to you, if you recognize yourself in any of these or other versions of imposter syndrome, and if you would like some new tools and support for how to move through imposter syndrome, because you don't like that feeling of emotional bloat, of feeling like there's a story or a body of work or just an expression of yourself that's trapped inside of you and it wants to come out, and you're dealing with that, that like tightness, that frustration of, that tension between the desire to express yourself and the fear of expanding. If you want to play around with that and get some support and companionship around it, I am hosting a free workshop a little bit later this month on Tuesday, May 20th at 1 p.m. Eastern. And yes, there will be a replay if you're unable to attend live. But I really hope you'll come join me. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. It's a workshop on that fear of visibility and working through it. The workshop is called Own Your Voice. And something that we're going to be exploring together in this workshop is how fear is actually not a problem. You know how I was saying earlier that imposter syndrome is actually evidence that you are on the cusp of expanding into that next thing, that next layer of your development, that next version of yourself. Fear is not a problem. It's actually something that we can use as a doorway into authentic expression, into our self expression. And if you're curious about how we do that, I hope you'll join me at this workshop. It's a practice that I used right before recording this podcast. You know how I was saying that I had started recording a totally different podcast on a different topic, and then the imposter syndrome hit me, and it was making me feel all confused and shut down. Um, I didn't move through that by ignoring the fear or by trying to force it uh, to disappear, because that actually doesn't work. I don't know about you, but that doesn't work for me. That just gets the fear even more fearful, and the knot becomes tighter and the spiral becomes more ingrained. So, what I did instead was I took a little time out to dialogue with the fear, to get curious with the fear, to have a conversation with it. And that's actually how I got back into connection with myself and back into connection with what it was that I actually wanted to talk about today. I'm going to teach you how to do exactly that in this workshop. So I would love for you to join me. You can sign up by going to my website, annaholtzman.com, and there's a little tab in the menu called Free Workshop. You can register there. You can also find it in my link in bio on Instagram, it's my Instagram is at Anna_Holtzman. Come to the workshop. It'll give you a little taste of what it's like to work with me as a coach. And I do have a small number of coaching spots open this month. But whether or not you take that next step into coaching with me at this workshop, you're going to learn tools that you can use for the rest of your life. You're going to learn tools that will help you to melt through the freeze and the stuckness, not by avoiding it, but by dialoguing with it. So I really look forward to seeing you there. Again, sign up at my website, annaholtzman.com, or at my Instagram at Anna_Holtzman. And it's been so fun to be here with you today. I have thoroughly enjoyed this. I hope that you did too. sending lots of love and lots of encouragement. And I look forward to seeing you next time. Take care. If you enjoyed today's episode, please do me a favor. Hit that follow button so you don't miss a thing and leave a rating or review. It helps more people find this show, and honestly, it makes my day. And if you're looking for more ways to trust yourself and start listening to that gut instinct of yours, come hang out with me on Instagram at Anna_Holtzman. Let's keep the conversation going. Thanks so much for listening, and until next time, trust yourself. You've got this.